Hi, and welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. Today on Farm Connections, we talk with Jessica Espenshade from the National Wildlife Federation about the Cover Crop Champion Program and about how it helps to develop leaders who can provide information and knowledge to farmers and crop advisors. Ken Tesi informs us of the importance of agricultural exports, and I sit down for a conversation with Steve Lawler of the Mower County Soil and Water Conservation District. All here today on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Farm Connections, sponsored by Alcorn Clean Fuel, a farmer-owned cooperative in Claremont, Minnesota, produces ethanol, high-protein livestock feed, and corn oil, and beverage-grade carbon dioxide for resale to benefit its members and their communities. Absolute Energy, a locally owned facility, produces 115 million gallons of ethanol annually, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood. The Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, collaborating with businesses and entrepreneurs to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products. You can learn more at auri.org. Kahn Tile Supply, Leroy, Minnesota, and New Hampton, Iowa, since 1985, supplying the market with field drain tile products, dual wall, metal culverts, septic systems, PVC, and plumbing supplies.
We're at the Terry and Cindy Hamilton farm near Elkton, Minnesota to learn a little bit more about cover crops and champions. And with us today is a representative from the National Wildlife Federation, Jessica Espenshade. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, there's an exciting event here. What is it?
Yeah, so this is a field day to talk about cover crops and why they're so important. So the two of the farmers that are being highlighted during today are Tom Cotter and Tom Finnegan, and they are cover crop champions, which is a program that National Wildlife Federation funds.
Well, other than the obvious, what's a champion?
Yeah, so champions are twofold. So we have outreach champions, which is the Soil and Water Conservation District, and then we have farmer champions. So they both have their own sets of expertise, but the farmers really are passionate and they have the experience of putting different sustainable ag practices on the ground, such as cover crops. And so they have not only the passion, but also the experience, and they really want to spread the message to other farmers. And the outreach champions of the Soil and Water Conservation District are great partners to help them invest deeper into the community.
The National Wildlife Federation helped incentivize and pay for this program, is that correct?
Yeah, so we offer both communication support as well as financial support. So they come together and they have a application that they send in, and then we pick the ones that are most innovative and the most exciting, and then they're able to request a budget to be funded. So they have different activities such as field days in mind, and they set up a budget, and we're able to cover the costs of those different events as well as help with the media outreach and what they're planning to say or do during the event.
Well, since you had 2 times as many applicants as successful winners, what made this one stand out?
It was really their passion and dedication, as well as if you talk to the farmers, they really have unique personalities, and they are not only invested in their community, but they want to make the name of agriculture better. They don't want it to just be an individual approach, they really want it to be a community stewardship approach. So not only did they have past events that they've done and past outreach that they've done that's been very successful, but they also had a great plan of saying, these are the gaps that we see in the agricultural community, here's how we can fill them. So it was very much of a streamlined process that I was like, yes, I want to work with these guys because they're great personalities, but they also have a very solid, concrete plan.
And why do you think the participation has been so great?
I think that people know that they can do more on their farms. So I think that they know that they can take their experience to the next level. And especially in our world today, like, you have to set up your farm for the next generation to take over. And so some people are coming and they're like, how can I make my profits better? How can I make my impact broader? and not only in my lifetime, but in future generations. And I think that willingness and that need is present, and these personalities are known in this community. So when the need and the personality type mesh, it makes for an event that you can't miss.
So beyond this event, what do you hope for an outcome?
Yeah, so really I hope for broader implementation of cover crops. So it's not just coming to an event and having questions, but it's also being able to take Tom's or a farmer's personal experience and saying, how can this relate to my own farm? So how can I take my lessons and take them back and implement them? And then they can become farmer champions as well. So it's just kind of a 6th degree of separation. So you have one farmer that does it who impacts another, and then the impact just kind of spirals from there. And you create sustainable agriculture practices that are not a new and innovative idea. They are now the farming norm.
Is there something genuine and authentic about working with farmers and the people that are actually raising crops and livestock as compared to the internet or a textbook?
Oh, absolutely. Number one is that you can ask questions. So for me, I mean, I was raised in an agricultural community, but I've never farmed. And so if I go around telling other farmers what to do, they're not going to listen to me, nor should they. They should listen to the people who are actually doing it on the ground. And so I'm even coming to these events as a learning opportunity. So I go, I ask questions, and they're able to actually pull up the cover crop from the ground and show you what the soil structure is like, show you what the root system is like. You can't get that from a textbook. And internet videos are great, but if you have follow-up questions, then you're kind of at a standstill. Whereas here it can be a broader conversation.
Well, as a young lady, you grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan with this job, and now you're in rural Minnesota.
Yeah.
What are some differences and also similarities in land types, people, and agricultural systems when you look at those 3 areas?
Yeah, so I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is not farmland based. It's very urban because, I mean, you have the university center there. So, and I haven't been able to explore much of Michigan farmland. But Pennsylvania to here, I mean, I worked with farmers my entire life. I used to work for Pennsylvania Association of Conservation Districts, have very similar mentality of people. And I mean, farmers, they want to do what's best for their community. They want to do what's best for the environment. They are not individualistic thinkers, and they're very genuine people. So working with them, you can strategize, and they're incredibly smart, and they know their farms incredibly well. And so being able to take that level of knowledge and that desire to succeed, I mean, that crosses landscapes for whatever state you're in, as long as you're working with farmers.
And today the farmers heard Terry Hamilton speak about Grandpa and Dad, and now himself. So that's 3 generations, and he also talked about his son, so that's 4. So I'm thinking that most farmers are thinking community, but they're also thinking legacy in terms of generations.
Exactly. I mean, you always want to leave the land better than you found it. So if your children are gonna have productive lives as a farming community or as a farming trade, I mean, you have to leave it at a better place than you found it. So yes, your father had certain ag practices in mind, and then you learn more, and so then you change. You're able to have that flexibility of what can I do that will just make everything a little bit better. And so then your child can take over, and not only have you left them with the best possible productive land that you can, then they're able to take their knowledge and expand it even further.
Maybe to the next generation.
Exactly. That's always the hope.
Is there ever a perception that wildlife and agriculture don't do well together?
I think sometimes they're thought of as separate entities, but they don't need to be. So yes, National Wildlife Federation obviously wants wildlife to extend to future generations. However, it's not just focused on individual wildlife, it's also focused on habitat and habitat quality, and agriculture is a big part of that. And I mean, how many farmers have you talked to that are super excited that they saw quail on their property? It's just the understanding that everything is connected and everything that you do affects something else, whether that be wildlife or people. But having a greater standard for your land will impact so many other things around you, including wildlife.
So how do cover crops positively impact wildlife?
So there's actually very little research on this, which is actually another side job that I have that we're trying to promote this. But I mean, number one, it offers shelter in the winter when they don't have a lot of shelter options. It offers food for grazing deer. When you have quail that actually want to build a nest, they can build it in covers. And so just having that habitat situation where otherwise you would have barren land is invaluable for wildlife.
More food, better habitat. And if we can hold the soil in place so the wind in the soil isn't moving it, we've improved soil quality, habitat quality, and water quality, right?
Absolutely. So it's not just animals that are on the farmland. I mean, everything has a ripple effect. So every piece of soil that you lose into the river system is influencing that quality of that water, which will then be used by people and wildlife on a much grander scale than just the individual farm.
Well, I'm so glad agriculture and wildlife can coexist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time. Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Since President Trump took office in January of this year, nothing has garnered more attention from an agricultural perspective than trade agreements between the United States and other countries. There has already been an executive order to end U.S. participation in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, trade agreement. There has also been discussions on renegotiating the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. NAFTA and other U.S. trade agreements are very important for the future of ag exports and ultimately for farm profitability. The NAFTA trade agreement with Mexico and Canada, which has been in place for 21 years, allows many goods and services to be traded back and forth between the participating countries without tariffs. U.S. agricultural exports have grown from $9 billion per year to approximately $39 billion per year in the past 2 decades since NAFTA was enacted. The U.S. currently has a market share of about 65% for ag products purchased by Canada and Mexico. Mexico is the third largest trade partner, trailing only China and Canada in 2015, and the U.S. sent about $18 billion in ag products to Mexico, led by corn, soybeans, dairy products, pork, and beef. The U.S. also imports approximately $21 billion of ag products from Mexico, led by fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, and processed foods. Trade relations with China are also very important to the agriculture industry, as China is the largest market for U.S. agricultural products, in peaking at about $26 billion in 2012. China is a major buyer of U.S. soybeans, coarse grains, and feed products to support China's growing livestock industry. In recent years, there has also been growing demand in China for U.S. pork and other food products. Approximately 47% of the total 2016 U.S. soybean production of over 4 billion bushels is expected to be exported during the coming year, with China being the largest customer for U.S. soybeans. The U.S. accounts for approximately 40% of the international corn trade, with total U.S. corn exports for 2016-17 estimated at over 2 billion bushels, which is about 15% of the total U.S. corn production. Trade negotiations are very complex and usually take years to develop, and many times it is not just economic issues that are difficult to negotiate with other nations, but also labor, environmental, and social issues. It's probably far too early to predict dire consequences to the U.S. from any renegotiation of trade deals under NAFTA or with any other country, and we should remember that there is a possibility for new trade deals to be developed between the U.S. and other countries. However, we need to recognize that the agriculture industry and ultimately farm operators and rural communities have a lot to gain or lose depending on the outcome of future U.S. trade relations and trade deals with our foreign partners. That's all for today. We'll be back next time with another report.
Well, joining us on Farm Connections is a good friend and a steward of the land, Steve Lawler from the Mower County Soil and Water Conservation District. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks.
Well, Steve, you're a resource specialist, right?
Well, that's correct, Dan. That's usually a term they give people that have to do a little bit of everything.
Well, there's a lot to do, and in specifically soil health and cover crop, you're really a specialist, and you've done some things about putting a tour together. What's this all about?
Farmers have been noticing for many, many years that agronomic practices that we see commonly throughout the landscape allow us to get to high levels of productivity, which is great. And there's all kinds of reasons why farmers do what they do, but they have noticed some challenges with them. And one of the challenges is erosion, loss of nutrients, and just a general degradation of the quality of the soil. And some of these farmers have recognized this and have decided to do something about it. And what they've done is they've looked at some of the agronomic practices and they're beginning to tweak some of those practices, not eliminate them by any means, but look at techniques that would address some of these issues that they've noticed on their farms over generations.
Well, you've put together a good team of people to help answer some of the questions. What kind of questions do farmers ask?
Farmers ask, well, number one, what's all that green stuff out there in the late fall and early spring? And referring to the cover crop technologies that are coming in at this point, which are not new at all. Cover crops have been established in many of our southern states for years, and it goes way back to our grandfathers who used cover crops to build soil nutrient levels and stop erosion as well. Today, the new aspect of cover crops is incorporating cover crops in corn, soybean enterprises. That's fairly new, especially in our area, and because of our latitude, there are some difficulties associated with that, and there are some farmers that are writing the formula for how to do that, and it's interesting, it's coming. The technology is really being developed by farmers themselves. And so other farmers are asking, where can we get this information? And who can we talk to answer some of our questions and concerns?
You're working with many farmers, many non-farmers. What's the outcome? What do you hope to accomplish?
My goal is to really begin to learn the science behind the soil health principles and to give that information to farmers so that they can make their own decisions. Whatever decision they make for good reasons, and these are actually complicated questions, and they need the best data possible. And also, the data is not applicable in every region, but data really should come from close regional areas. And in the particular area of Lawler and the surrounding counties, we have a fleet of soils that is completely different in many respects than soils to the east and soils to the west. And so we need specific information here for these farmers to make decisions, and my goal is to help provide that information.
You mentioned regions of our state, and really anywhere in agriculture country, the soils are different when you compare one area to another. How do areas outside of the area you work get information?
I think in the past, tremendous amounts of information are being provided by our land-grant universities, University of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa State, and through Extension, and that is still a great source of information. And Extension is truly stepping up to the plate when it comes to soil health aspects and the latest research that is going on, and so that is an excellent source of information. One does have to ask the question whether or not it is information that is fully applicable for one's particular major land resource area, your particular soil types or not, but they are again and still a big source of information.
And you also do some work with another watershed district within our region, correct?
Yes, we actually have two watershed districts. We have the Cedar River Watershed District and the Turtle Creek Watershed District, and each is heavily involved in addressing soil and water conservation issues.
Inside of those respective water districts, or watershed districts, Steve, is the only issue soil moving off farms, or are there other issues?
There's drainage issues as well too. I mean, drainage systems are an essential part of our major land resource area because many of our soils are inherently wet, and they have seasonal saturation conditions in the soil profile in the rooting zone, and so these districts help to maintain those systems, and they also are certainly concerned about water quality issues as well too. The water quality of the drainage ways that they help manage. And so they are constantly looking for funding sources to help farmers that wish to address especially erosion issues near drainage systems.
When you talk about that staff, what other things can they do besides helping with soil health and cover crop and setting up tours?
We have several technicians that do a wonderful job establishing conservation practices for farmers. We also do a lot of water sampling for the purposes of knowing where our water resources are right now and where we need to concentrate those conservation practices. So we prioritize many times where we work, so we concentrate in areas that will give us the best bang for the buck.
Well, it's quite obvious why farmers want this to work. I mean, it's their livelihood. And it's also their farm, a piece of legacy that they hope the next generation can use. But why do people in town or non-farmers care about soil and water conservation?
People that are not in ag truly understand, though, the importance of clean water and how we all, no matter what land use practice we have, there are challenges generally associated with those, and most of our land use practices do affect water quality. I think urban people understand that very well, and so they are concerned, but I think they also want to know, what are the facts, in the agricultural area, and what are truly the things that we need to be concerned about, and what don't we need to be concerned about, and of course they're concerned about our food supply as well, just like everyone else, and so they understand that agriculture is definitely here to stay, and how can we make it better, and how can we support the agricultural community?
It feeds us, it clothes us.
That's exactly right.
We need it.
Right.
This is extremely gratifying to see this nice tour to come together with the hard work you and your staff put in.
Thank you, Dan.
It is awesome. But there must be something specific about the event that is a takeaway that you observed.
I think the most wonderful thing about this is we have farmers teaching farmers, and this is really the most effective way to establish concepts and ideas that are complex. I don't think we're capable of doing it as a government entity, but farmers can. They speak the language, they understand the conditions, they understand the soils, and they're actually doing it. And those are three key things that can truly sell, in our case, conservation.
You're sounding like a partner to farmers and landowners.
We are finally beginning to realize we have to be partners. This is a very complex, very large issues here, and the only way to solve it is to have partnerships with those that are actually doing the work.
Well, you are a great resource, and the tour was a very huge success, and I wish you success in the future.
Thank you, Dan, very much. Appreciate that.
Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Renewable energy has long been the focus of gaining energy independence in this country, and the state of Minnesota has been a leader on several fronts. Each year, Minnesota produces 1.2 billion gallons of ethanol, 63 million gallons of biodiesel, and wind and solar production is currently 915,000 megawatt hours annually. Minnesota currently has more E85 stations than any other state. Randy Doyle is the general manager of Alcorn Ethanol Co-op.
What's exciting about Minnesota to me is we had such a forward-looking legislature that said, let's displace petroleum, let's replace what we're doing today. And they've got some very aggressive legislation in place that we're working towards. We frankly have the ability to do a lot more in Minnesota.
Renewable fuels mean jobs, something Minnesota commodity groups like to point to as a major benefit, and farmers have played a role.
We've already proven how incredibly productive our farmers are. They're doing more and more off of fewer acres. That's amazing. But that more and more means you need to have some way to utilize that crop, and that's where our industry comes in.
Tom Slenica is the executive director of Minnesota Soybean. He says the biodiesel industry has shown strong growth and has a major economic impact in the state.
Well, Minnesota is very lucky in that we've got the production and we've got the usage, and it's driving almost 5,400 jobs here in the state are derived because of biodiesel. And the equation just came out in some new statistics from the Department of Ag here in Minnesota. And for every million gallons that we use, it's actually 74 jobs. So the math works out pretty directly, and everyone can see the added value in our local towns and communities.
Minnesota has seen more and more solar panels going up across rural areas in an ever-changing landscape of renewable energy. And wind farms are also commonly seen across the state. All are parts of energy production in Minnesota. Farmers have been producing green energy their whole life. What's more green than producing crops to feed the livestock or to feed the people? Now, through biodiesel, ethanol, solar panels, and other new sources of energy, farmers are right in the middle of a green energy revolution. This is Lynn Kettleson reporting.
Passion, knowledge, and experience, all hallmarks of dedication and success. By providing an opportunity to learn and grow, farmers today are building on tradition and laying the groundwork to provide a solid foundation for the future. I'm Dan Hoffman. Thanks for joining us today on Farm Connections.
Funding for this program is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.